One of the really interesting things that I've noticed about computers in general as of 2024 into 2025 is that we've got all sorts of different cases that you can put your computers in. They're really stylistic and they're really cool, but I've noticed that the ones that I've chosen are really big. But now I'm taking a look around and I'm noticing how large, how much space it's taking up, and I'm wanting to see if I can take that and put it into my audio video rack. Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Matt and welcome to a review of me taking apart my computer and putting it in the brand new Sliger CX3171a XL. Let's start this in a very chronological way. The case that I currently have is a Deep Cool Matrix 55 V3, and I've honestly really loved it. It was my first computer case that had a glass panel, and it actually had a glass panel front, and I had all these CPU coolers and all these fans that would light up with RGB, and it just looked amazing. However, my needs have changed over the past couple of years, and I'm looking to really shrink computers down so it can slide them into smaller places and not have these really gaudy things lying around. So with that, I am taking out my computer, which is an Intel i7 9700K, not the latest and the greatest, but it's a pretty decent processor, and it's attached to the MSI Z390 Gaming Edge AC motherboard with Corsair Vengeance 64 gigs of DDR4 RAM, and also has the Cooler Master Hyper Evo 212 CPU cooler on that. So in all honesty, a pretty standard build for about 2019-2020 in all honesty, and it works very well. It has done me well for so long, but again, I'm just looking at taking this and shrinking it down, not really upgrading any parts for the time being. I'll get more into the Sliger case in a little bit here, but for starters, it is a 3-unit tall case. So that being said, my current build will not fit inside it. So what I'm going to have to do is trade out the CPU coolers. So I've opted to use the Noctua NHL9i Chromex.Black, and it is known for a very good CPU cooler for smaller form factor computers. In my mind, this is probably a contentious point in my mind, because it was either going for this or going for a full AIO radiator build. And I've never worked with AIO CPU coolers before. I've been honestly a little bit scared of introducing liquid into my computers, but I figured that I'd just go one last hurrah and just try out a smaller form factor CPU cooler. I've actually used this in a different computer. I've loved it. It seemed to work well. So we're just going to trade out the Hyper Evo 212 for the NHL9i. So after we've done that, we're now going to go back to the old case, and I'm going to start salvaging everything that I can. I'm going to grab the RGB case fans. I've got like 16 terabytes of HDD hard drives in bottom that I'm going to be taking out. I'm going to be taking out some of the cables and all that kind of fun stuff, and I'm going to be leaving the Deep Cool Matrix 55 V3 completely empty by the end of it. So at this point, we're going to be prepping the new case for the computer. Again, this is the Sliger CX3171a XL. And the reason why I chose this is when I was browsing Amazon, I was looking for 3-unit tall server cases. And the problem that I was running into was the GPU. And when it comes to server cases for standard businesses or, home labs or whatever, the PCIe slots in the back of the case aren't really uniform for larger GPUs. You can get about like 3 slots maybe, But then you'll start worrying about it, like if you have a larger GPU like myself, which is the Gigabyte Aorus 3070 Ti, it's like a 4.5 slot GPU. It's massive. And if you get anything more than like a 3 PCIe deep slot in the back, then it's going to start running into, like, if you look at some of these other cases, they'll start overlapping with motherboard or overlapping with the power supply. It just doesn't work. So why it chose the Sliger is because it includes a PCIe riser cable and lays the GPU flat, which is really ingenious because then you can slide the motherboard under it, and then you can have a power supply up above on top of the motherboard, and it just works well. We'll talk about the power supply in a little bit because that was actually an accidental oops on my part. So now we're putting in the old fans in the new case. We're getting all that wired up, and now we're putting the motherboard and the new power supply in. Originally, I had a Corsair ATX 750 watt power supply, and I thought I was just going to slide it in and it'd be perfectly fine. It turns out, because this is a 3-unit tall server case, it is actually using a small form factor for the power supply. That was a massive mistake on my part for not reading up ahead, because I had to frantically go and find a small form factor 750 watt power supply, which turns out finding the exact one that I needed was going to be a little bit more difficult, and took me about an extra month in this time frame for it to finally show up. So in this case, the new power supply is the Thermaltake Thorough Power small form factor 750 watt. I want to say that is the Platinum. So for this, I paid about $170 for, which is was not expecting to drop that kind of money. And of course, because it was a small form factor power supply, you have to pay that extra quote unquote tax versus a normal 750 watt power supply. So that was an unexpected cost that really just pay attention to when you start looking into getting these types of server cases and whatnot. So now you see me wiring up the computer, and this is one of the parts that I both enjoy and hate, or I enjoy it because you're able to kind of make it look good by like routing the cables correctly, but I run into the fact that I'm a little bit OCD where I want everything to look perfect, but then I don't have custom cables, so I can't cut everything to the correct length, and sometimes things are overlaying other spots where there's either not enough cable or too much cable, so then I start just kind of giving up, where it's like, okay, I just need to plug it in, I just need it to work, and it's a 3-unit server case, so I'm going to put the top on it. You can't see into it, so it kind of doesn't matter when it comes to cable management. So at that point, this is the interesting part. We're now putting in the GPU, and this was actually another point of contention for me. The MSI Z390 Gaming Edge AC motherboard has 2 M.2 SSD slots. In the original build, I had my operating system on a 500 gigabyte SSD. Then I had 2 4 terabyte M.2 SSDs. One was on the motherboard, and then the other one I used a PCIe adapter where you can put the M.2 SSD in a PCIe Express X16 slot. And then on top of that, then I had my couple of hard disk drive, large capacity drives. So at this point, I was just getting rid of the hard disk drives. I'm going to put that in like a network later. But for the actual computer, I now had this issue where I have 3 M.2 drives that go into 2 spots. And later, after the fact, I just took whatever I could off of the old operating system, put it, like, reformatted one of the 4 terabytes. So now I've got 8 terabytes in 2 slots. So the 500 gigabyte, I'm just phasing that one out. So with how it's going to work, this PCIe X16 M.2 adapter was going to stick out too far vertically and was going to run into the GPU. So I had to phase that out, Had to reduce it down to 2 M.2 drives because that was the only spots that I had on the motherboard, which is a little bit unfortunate. But, you know, as you go through these builds, these are the things that you find out after the fact. So then finally, we're just finishing up the wiring, getting that all said and done, and I think we're finally able to give this a test. All right, well, I think everything's plugged in. So this is going to be the first temp monitors there. Let's take a look. Okay. At least it's kind of starting up, but then there we go. Now we got it to boot, kind of. At least it kind of starts. So then at this point, I had brought it to my workplace, swapped out the hard drives, and reinstalled the operating system. And now we're bringing it back home, and we're now doing the final step of finally putting it into the rack. And this sucked because the position of the rack is not great. I've got cables all over the place that I'll address at some point in the future. I'm actually going to have to gut out the inside of the rack at some point and redo the audio cables. I think a couple got disconnected in the meantime, but here we are. All right, so this is the rack finally with the gaming rig in, and this is the test that only I have been waiting for. $10 says I didn't turn on the power supply. All right, take 2 of the test only I am interested in. And it's on. Woohoo! So there you have it. It's done. It's all together and it works. It runs. Just wanted to say huge shout out to Sliger. I want to say it's a single guy making these really high quality cases. They're a little bit pricey, but you get a lot of hardware. You get the PCIe riser express cable. You get like a ton of hardware, like all sorts of screws, and you can actually choose on the website if you want the case to get some sliders to be able to slide in and out of the spot on the rack. You can choose if you want to get it with a radiator. I mean, there are a lot of options, and it's like high quality stuff. The case is a really nice thick metal. I don't know offhand what it is. I think it might be aluminum, but don't quote me on that. But I mean, it's a great case, and I love how it looks. I love that it works well, and I am one happy customer. And yeah, there we have it. It's a couple month-long process. I mean, I've been planning this ever since I got this rack, just trying to see if I can minimize the footprint of my PC and finally put it somewhere where it actually will fit. And yeah, I am very, very happy with how it turned out. Again, thanks so much for watching. And if you enjoy this content, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Got some more stuff coming up pretty soon, actually, that you guys will be pretty interested to see. And again, I know this video wasn't sim racing related, but whenever I get new toys and new rack setups and new audio equipment and that kind of stuff, I figured that I'd showcase it with you guys because you might be interested in see what I'm running. So again, thanks so much for watching. Hope you guys have a great day today. Take care. Bye.